This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The download recap, as usual, is brought to you by Podscribe. You can find out more at podscribe.com. This week's top stories: the podcast preservation paradox, how Alitu ended up at WWDC, an interview with Colin Gray, YouTube prepares crackdown on mass-produced and repetitive videos as concern over AI slop grows, Spotify ensures pod.link's future. Let's get started. As video podcasting grows in popularity and audience share, two schools of thought have formed. Preservationists who are worried podcasting could lose the soul of what makes it unique at growth at all cost video, and growth advocates who welcome the YouTube expansion into podcasting as it brings new audiences. A quote from Tom Webster, quote, "But here's the thing, they're both right, and the binary thinking is getting in the way of smart solutions," end quote. Addressing the preservationist, he shows data surrounding RSS feed episode production, which has declined month over month 4.7%, according to Livewire's data. Webster cautions against putting too much weight on supply-side metrics. The health of TV and film isn't measured by raw output of episodes and movies. For the demand side, podcast is booming with growing reach and time spent sitting at about 6 hours per week. Currently in France, the UK, and Canada, there are initiatives lobbying governments to recognize podcasting with the same protections and support mediums like TV and film already receive. A common thread in all three initiatives is the underlying anxiety that podcasting's current growth trajectory could lead to a fundamental transformation of what they're trying to enshrine in the first place. And it's happened before. Radio in the United States chose to treat streaming audio as an existential threat and changed drastically as a result. A quote from Webster, quote, "Most critically, radio lost confidence in what made it unique, live, local, communal, spontaneous, and tried to compete on streaming's terms instead. The result? Radio ceded its distinctive value proposition while failing to win in spaces where it couldn't compete. The lesson isn't that change is bad, but that abandoning core strengths while chasing new trends can be catastrophic." End quote. Webster proposes the solution for podcasting's future isn't to resist change, but at the same time, it must ensure support for formats that can't adapt to the economics of video production. Video podcasting has largely defaulted to chat show-styled productions because they're economic to produce. They have simple sets, they require small crews, and they have stable conditions. Certain genres that thrive in the world of audio podcasting immediately become economically difficult, if not impossible, when video is introduced. Audio fiction, documentaries, investigative journalism, they could all go extinct in a video-only world. Thus, the onus is on podcasting to ensure economic forces don't inadvertently narrow the industry's creative possibilities that made it unique in the first place. All right, time for me to be a roving reporter. As part of Sounds Profitable's mission to uplift and connect the podcast industry, we're conducting a series of interviews with industry professionals and leaders to share their stories and insights about where podcasting is and where it's going. This week's subject, Colin Gray, founder of the podcast host and Alitu. Recently, the Alitu editor made an appearance on screen during WWDC. Here's a quote from Gray about seeing Alitu on the stream. Quote, "It was partly a surprise, but partly arranged ahead of time. We've been talking to the Safari developer team in particular around making Alitu more compatible with Safari. Safari has always had some small issues in the past with running web apps in the same state that Chrome has, but they've done a lot of work in the past year or so to bring it up to the same standard." End quote. Gray has been in the podcasting world for quite some time, launching the podcast host back in 2010, in addition to teaching podcasting in universities as far back as 2007. In his time in the industry, he's seen the evolution of podcasting tech and worked towards making the industry more accessible. Quote, "It's been such a privilege over that amount of time to reach so many people, to help so many shows start throughout that time. People come up to me quite often at events and say, like, how their podcast began because of the content they found on our websites or in our podcasts, and how it wouldn't exist without them. They claim, at least. I'm sure it would regardless, but it was great to be a help. End quote. On July 15th, YouTube will update its YouTube Partner Program monetization policies with more detailed guidelines on what can and cannot qualify for monetization. The specific language of the update has not been released yet. A quote from writer Sarah Perez, quote, "Some YouTube creators were concerned that the updates would limit their ability to monetize certain types of videos, like reaction videos or those featuring clips. But a post from YouTube head of editorial and creator liaison Renee Ritchie says it's not the case," end quote. Ritchie's video says the update is minor, intended to better identify and strengthen existing policies against monetizing content that is mass-produced or repetitive, which keeps things in line with the YPP requirement that creators upload original and authentic content. While not explicitly called out in Ritchie's video or existing language from YouTube, outlets like TechCrunch and Mashable are supposing this is a step towards kneecapping both the gray area of content farms that re-upload content, which is technically against YPP standards, as well as the burgeoning field of generative AI slop content. For our final top story, pod.link is headed home, and Pod News has the story. Originally developed by Nathan Gathright, the service allows podcasters to share a single URL that leads to a landing page for a podcast, any podcast, that aggregates every place the show is currently available into that one page. Gone are the days of sending a Spotify link to an Apple Podcasts user. In 2021, the service was acquired by Podsites, which was then acquired by Spotify in 2022. Here's a quote from Spotify about this. Quote, "Spotify is committed to building great products that help creators succeed. As we continued investing in native solutions that help creators and publishers track and promote their podcast episodes more effectively, we've decided to return pod.link to its founder." End quote. Spotify is in the process of returning pod.link to Gathright with a focus on making the transition as seamless as possible to not interrupt those who use it. Finally, it's time for my quick hits. These are articles I've covered throughout the week that didn't quite make the cut for top stories in today's episode, but are still worth including in your weekend reading. Here's what I got for you this week. The podcast host has launched the Indie Podcaster Survey 2025, an anonymous survey of podcasters' experiences this year, with entrants entered to win a drawing that has $500 in audio gear from Lewitt. While it's logical to presume a host-read ad campaign didn't work because the show, host, or audience was a bad fit for that brand, Signal Hill Insights president Paul Riesmandel shares 3 common data-backed problems he finds in host-read campaigns. Best-selling author Gretchen Rubin has signed to Backyard Ventures, growing their developing newsletter portfolio with Rubin's suite of publications. Ad Exchanger covers Sounder's new version of their brand suitability and contextual targeting AI tool for podcasts, which has been specifically designed to understand the nuances of Spanish language audio content. And finally, here's a fun one to end out the week for you. Spooler, in collaboration with Pantheon Media and the San Francisco Travel Association, have published an interactive Grateful Dead-themed puzzle podcast in celebration of the band's 60th anniversary. And that was the download recap brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know I went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check them out using the link in the description below, or you can go to Sounds Profitable's download section at soundsprofitable.com. I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Tom Webster, and Brian Barletta. And as always, I'd like to extend a special thanks to you for listening to me as I bring you all the top stories you might have missed in podcasting this week.
Download complete.